Welcome back to the Small Business Mindset. A lot of the times we are going on a journey and we are unsure of what path to take. Maybe we know where we want to be at the end and we're here at the beginning and we can see it and we can start putting the pieces together, but really the challenge comes right in the middle. So as you are going on a journey and figuring out what your next steps are, whether you have a big goal or a little goal, I hope to give you a little bit of direction and a little bit of the history as far as where I went through with my path to put my goals on the right track. Some of you that know me know that I'm a distance runner, and it's something I didn't take on until I was in my mid-30s. About 6 years ago, my husband came to me and says, "Hey, I think I want to run a marathon. Do you want to do it with me?" And I thought, wow, that's a big question to ask somebody. Prior to that, so I'll kind of set the stage a little bit. Prior to that, the most him and I had done in distance running, we did a bunch of 5Ks and 10Ks. We actually did our first half marathon together the year before. That was a lot. It really, really pushed me. And, full disclosure, the only reason I really got into distance running, doing those 5Ks and then 10Ks, was for beer at the end. There was usually a charity race involved, and at the end, they fed you beer. And for those of you that know where I live in Midwest, and I live just outside of Kansas City. And one of our first runs that we did together and did with a bunch of friends is a run that happens every spring called the Brew to Brew. And at the time, it started at Boulevard Brewing Company in downtown Kansas City, Missouri, and it ran to Free State Brewery, which is in Lawrence, Kansas, which is the town where we live. And so that was a really just a fun way to engage in running. There was beer along the way. It's billed as kind of a relay race because it's about 40 miles from the start to finish. So they don't expect anyone to run the whole thing. Some people do, not me, just as a clarity there. And the object is you put a team together. So each of your teammates get to run a short section, and that section could be a couple miles up to maybe 5 max. And the fun thing about it is you're doing it together and you're cheering each other on, and you designate someone to be the driver, and whether you all pile together in a van or you take a couple cars. But I know my husband always liked the fact he was the first leg, so he got his run out of the way, and then he could really enjoy himself the rest of the day and drink the beer, right? So it was a day long of fun and sweatiness and pushing yourself and drinking beer and having a party at the end. So that's how our running days got started, and we did it with a couple of great friends that really encouraged us along the way. So when my husband came to me, so this would have been in 2016, and said, "Hey honey, do you want to run a marathon?" I thought, okay. And the way my brain works, I am a very systematic planning type of personality. I said, let me get back to you on that. So I immediately went and I Googled training programs for a marathon in 6 months. Because when he asked me, we were about 6 months out from the race. And I thought, well, I know what I'm capable of, meaning I know I can do a 5 or 10K. I can probably do a half because we did it last year. Training was it was hard, but can I physically do it? And I wanted the analytics and the data to tell me if I could really physically do this or not. So lo and behold, I went online and there was a 6-month training program for a marathon run. And as I started dissecting this plan, what the plan said is that, okay, week 1, you're going to do between 1 and 3 miles. You're going to do these short little runs. I'm like, well, I can do that. Yeah, I can do a little 1 miler up to 3 miles. And then on the weekends, you would gradually go into longer and longer runs. So over that 6-month time period, it didn't have you running every day, because I know with busy schedules and life and work and families and all this stuff, there was no way I would be able to commit that kind of time just to running to prepare for this marathon, which was going to be in October. But I liked the fact that the way this program laid it out, it allowed me to ease into it and allowed me to work it within my schedule. So I looked at the data and I had to print out a spreadsheet because that's how my brain works. And I said, all right, I'm in. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So we got online and we signed up. We paid our entry fee, put in our names, and there we were. Holy crap, right? We're getting ready to run this marathon. So the blessing of all of this is that I had somebody, my partner, it was his idea to do it, and he was my big encourager along the way. So what we discovered during this journey of getting ready to run this marathon is the fact that we had a common goal. We both wanted to run the marathon, but we were running it for completely different reasons. He was running it because he was really getting into distance running, and he was really good at it. In fact, my husband Dale is a much faster runner than I am. And even though we're both athletically built and we both played sports in high school, I would say he has a lot more stamina, and just the way he's built and the way he's put together and his capability of running that far. I am a much slower runner. And when I first started running some distance running, I had to retrain myself on how to run. And that's something that has really been a life lesson for me in the rest of my life, because I grew up playing soccer and then I transitioned to tennis. Well, if you're familiar at all with those two sports, there's not a lot of distance running. It's a lot of sprinting, a lot of stopping and starting and pivoting and maneuvering your body in a way that is very brief and very sporadic. And I had to figure out how to run completely different. So when we first started running together, even to prepare for a 5K or less, I mean, there are plenty of runs out there that are 1Ks or 1 miler, right? You have to train your body to run and move in a very different way. I had to think about my breathing first and foremost, and I'm also an asthmatic, and how to control that in a way that, I always had my inhaler with me, or prepare for, is it going to be a really hot, humid day? Is it allergy season? What's happening with the air? That's very important. But also thinking about, how many breaths am I taking in? How many breaths am I expelling with my pacing? Also with my pacing, I had to think about, okay, I was a soccer player, so I was a sprinter. I ran more with a forward angle, more on my toes. And so my strides were a lot shorter. I had to train my brain and train my body, okay, lengthen my stride a little bit, but instead of hitting on the front of my foot, roll from the back or hit more in the middle of the foot. It's a little bit different step. Now, I'm not saying that if those of you that are distance runners have to run like I run, but I know for me, the way my body's built, I need to find a way to maximize the stamina of my legs and give myself time to find something that's more fluid. So I wasn't expelling a ton of energy by lifting my knees up too high or, expanding my legs too far apart. So I was maximizing the flow of a natural, and for those of you that are watching me on YouTube through this podcast, I'm literally moving my arms like my feet would move. So don't laugh at me here. But really finding a way for your body and your breath and your mind to all flow in one direct motion. So the training commenced. The 6-month training commenced. And what I learned over time is that first mile, in fact, the first 1.5 to 2 miles is always the hardest. You're a little creaky cranky and your muscles aren't warmed up yet and you're trying to get your breath down, right? And you're just like, ugh. And honestly, I don't love running. I love exercise when when it's with people that are fun, and when the temperature's just right outside and maybe a light breeze, right? I can find a way to like or not like anything. But that first mile or two was always the toughest, just getting in the groove and looking forward to getting there. By the time I hit mile 2, that's when the magic happens. That's when I'm like, okay, this is feeling good. It's feeling a little more effortless. I mean, the steps I'm taking, it's almost like an extension of the momentum I have, and my feet are lightly hitting the pavement. I'm not having to pump my arms really hard. It's just forward motion. And I'm working at a pace where I can still have a conversation with my husband. He didn't always love it that I talked to him the whole way, but it was a great time for us as a couple. So training went on after months, and we upped our mileage and upped our mileage. The longest run we did before the marathon was just over 18 miles. And I remember that Saturday because it was probably into September. And that was a doozy. I mean, that hurt pretty bad. But I'm thinking, okay, most of the training programs we looked at, if you could make it to almost 20, then you were good. You could then back off and give your body a rest before you went into that marathon, which was 26.2 miles. So they were trying to get you over the hump to be like, you're long enough, you can carry yourself for the last 6 or so miles. So 18 or so was about what we decided, okay, that was our max. Now let's start backing off a little bit to get our body and our muscles some time to rest before we go into the big day, right? So the big day is upon us. And most races like that start way early in the morning because of the heat of the day. And granted, it was October when we did the race, but For those of you that run or those of you that do any kind of activity like that, it's so much better to do it in the coolness of the morning than in the heat of the day because you don't want to overheat your body. So we started off at 7 o'clock in the morning, downtown Kansas City. For those of you familiar with downtown Kansas City, we started in Crown Center and we got to run all the way through the city. And what a beautiful experience it was. So away we go. And, I got music playing, feeling good, got my shoes, got my pants with my side pockets that I feel like a pack horse because I put, my protein bars and my extra snacks in there, half a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I mean, I laugh at pictures of myself. I look like a pack horse. I'm packing my food, for the whole race. Anyway, so we get going. And for those of you that run, there are hard times and not hard times and, times that are effortless and times that are hard, and there were hills. But as I went through the race, I didn't anticipate the wall. I didn't anticipate the time in the race where I felt totally deflated. And that was around mile 20. And it's funny because I had never run 20 miles before. I only made it to just about 18 or so. And so 20, I was thrilled that I made it there. And I remember the part of Kansas City we were in when we were running and that 20-mile hit. And I think, ironically enough, our good friends, Nate and Michelle, were there, the ones that are the runners, the ones that they're serious about this. They were there. And she took a picture of me. And I remember looking at my face thinking, oh my gosh, I would rather be anywhere but there, right? And she said to me, and I'm so glad that is the moment of the race that they found us, because I know they were coming. I didn't know if I'd see them at the beginning or the end, but they found us at mile 20. And I was being pretty verbal at that point and sharing my total disgust for having to be there and the pain I was in. And that's not like me. I have a pretty high pain tolerance. And I'm so fortunate that Dale, my husband, was like, you got this, you got this. Not once did that man complain. God love him. And I even said to him at one point, I would rather be having a child naturally than have to run this race right now. I felt that bad. I felt like in such pain, burning legs, burning feet. However much I selected my outfit, there was this little spot right under my arm where my sports bra was just making these little bitty micro movements and was chafing me raw, right? And, I found out later I was bleeding. I found out later my feet were bleeding. But it was very uncomfortable to the point where I'm like, I know I can't stop, but I really want to. If someone could give me an out, someone needed me in emergency. But having friends there that standing on the sidelines that had done this before, and they're like, you got this. They said, and she said to me, or my friend Michelle said, this is where your mind takes over. I know your body's hurting, and I know you've prepared, but it's painful. This is where your mind takes over. And I'm so glad she said that because that's exactly what I needed to do. I need to get way inside my head and think about what are you here for? You're not here to win a medal or, break a time, record, nothing like that. That was not the reason I was running. I was running to complete the race, walking, running, crawling, whatever, however I could get across the finish line. But that was my goal. And the reason I wanted to do it is because I know throughout my life, and probably this can relate to you if you're listening to this podcast and this topic's interesting to you, is that when we challenge ourselves physically in such a high demand way, it does something to our minds, and it allows our minds to open up in this wonderful way that we can do big things in other parts of our life. A physical challenge allows us to get really, really comfortable with pain. Not that I want to put you in pain all the time, but if you do something physical, and I don't care if it's just walking, I don't care if you hop on a bike or you're a row machine or you're a Peloton person or you love the, aerobics class or stuff, whatever you do, or you're a pretzel and you decide to embrace yoga and really get yourself in a position where you're feeling pain and you're really pushing your body to the limit safely, of course. There's some people that run that, I worry about them a little bit. But when you put yourself in that physical condition where it's mind over matter, it's mind over physical pain, it does something to your psyche. And I believe challenging yourself in that way helps overcome challenges in the rest of your life. So we finished the marathon. Woo, we finished the marathon. It was great. And the first thing I wanted to do when I got done is I wanted to sit down. And thankfully, our friends, Nate and Michelle, were there. And Michelle's like, don't sit down. Don't sit down. Get to the car first. If you sit down, you're not going to get up. Good advice, right? But it hurt. But best thing about that pain was the elation I felt from conquering that huge goal. It was huge. And for those of you that have run a marathon, you know, there's not a lot of people that have done that. And it is a huge feat. It's not for everybody. And I don't care if you walked a marathon or you ran it in, 3 hours. It's the fact that you decided to conquer that level of physical feat. Congratulations. That's awesome if you've done that. So I don't know if I'll ever run a marathon ever again, but what that has taught me is that I can do hard things. And those of you that are facing some challenges or going after some big goals, I encourage you, challenge yourself physically in a way first. My husband is in law enforcement and actually had a training class a number of years ago, and he came home from the training class. Actually, take that back. He didn't attend the training class because we were on vacation, which was probably the best type of relief he needed to get at the time to take a break from his career. Regardless, he was sent home with the materials from the class. And one of the materials from the class was a book that was called Emotional Intelligence for Law Enforcement Officers and Their Families, and understanding the psyche that goes into that type of profession. And I read the book, and it was a short book, but I'm so glad it was. And then we talked about it afterwards. And I said, oh my gosh, this describes you to a T. But what really brought to my forefront and really was the takeaway from the book was exactly the takeaway from the marathon. It was the fact in the law enforcement profession, and for those of you that are in law enforcement or work with law enforcement officers or are married or in a partnership with one, you get this. They are in this fight or flight mentality the second they put their vest on and their uniform and stuff like that, right? Because they're here to protect and serve. It is their job to save you or protect you from harm. And so when that happens, the physical aspect of them putting the vest and the badge and the uniform on, there's something that happens in your brain where you are pushed physically, even though you might not be running or doing anything physical at the time. There's something happens in your brain that says, I am in fight or flight mode. I need to be ready for a high adrenaline situation at any moment in time. And that does something to you physically. So the book went on to say when they get off of work, meaning when they're done with their shift and they're home with their families, right? Because the endorphins in their brain are working overtime, it is so hard for them to come off of that high. And in fact, it can't just gradually come off the high. That would be way too easy, right? No, they actually crash. And the crash a lot of times looks like they're a couch potato or they're a zombie or they're zoned out and then maybe not as in tune with communicating with their spouse or family, or maybe they just want to surf the web and just literally be like, bleh, for up 18 to 24 hours is what the research said it took for that person to come down off of that adrenaline high to be able to reset and rejoin society in a discerning way. But realistically, law enforcement officers, they don't get 18 to 24 hours in between their shifts to be able to totally relax their brains and their bodies and be able to plug back in. So what they suggested, which was really cool, is that there are different parts of our brain that we can exercise and rest at different times. So for example, if you are somebody that's in a high stress job, and they talk about right brain, left brain all the time. If you're somebody that's in a high stress job, and maybe you are analytic to the max all day long, all you're doing is crunching numbers, crunching scenarios, making it happen, right? And when you get home, you can't turn the brain off. Yeah, I get it. I'm that way too. The research in this book said the best way to be able to turn your brain off is to actually ignite the other side of your brain. So do an activity that is just as stimulating as the other activity you're trying to get rest from. So in my husband's case, being a law enforcement officer, fight or flight, adrenaline, ready to go at any minute to protect and serve, right? Running for him allowed his brain, the other side of the brain, because he was doing a physical activity that moved his body and stressed his body in a way, but he didn't have to think about it. He didn't have to worry about, okay, who am I protecting? Where's my gun? Where's my protection? Making sure what laws I'm abiding by. A lot of thinking has to go into this, but the running side, it was all physical stress. It had nothing to do with emotional stress, right? So the running for him, which was the best aha of this whole process of getting into running with him, was the fact he got a chance to be physically fit and healthy and moving in that direction and challenging himself physically while giving his brain a break from his everyday job. And this could definitely apply to you. If you're in a situation, maybe you're a high adrenaline person, you like going after big things and you like conquering big things. But realistically, keeping our energy up and making sure our physical selves get a break or our emotional selves get a break, challenging yourself in different ways and utilizing different sides of your brain to rest and push yourself at the same time. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Small Business Mindset. As always, a lot of business strengths and successes that we go through have to do with finding out that inner mindset and the inner strength so you can put all the tools together to take the next step.